Sorry about the delay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Wareham Planning Board meeting, Monday, March 27, 2023. It is 6:01 PM. We'll call the meeting to order with a roll call. Sherry Quirk.
Present.
Mike Baptiste.
Here.
Jane Gleason.
Here.
Sam Corbett.
Here.
And Carl Schultz.
Here.
And the Chair, Michael King, is here. Preliminary business, approval of the meeting minutes. The one that we got last minute, that was the one for 5/9?
No. That, we had gotten that previously. The one from Ken last minute was 5-3, I believe.
Okay. Well, that shouldn't be in the package then.
It's not.
Okay.
I think Jonathan sent these three out, or something.
Right. Okay.
I move that we approve the minutes for May 9th, 2022, 2/27/2023, and 3/13/23 as submitted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Boom. Okay, preliminary business, 7-20 Borrego Solar Systems, Inc., 27 Charge Pond Road, New Leaf extension of time, and because it's the same proponent and same conditions, we will address both 720 and 920 at the same time. Move someone come up.
Good evening, members of the board. Greg Sampson with Womble Bond Dickinson on behalf of New Leaf Solar. So we were here, I was virtual, apologize for that, but we were here at the last meeting to discuss the extensions, discuss the request to have revised decommissioning estimates prepared and submitted, which we did following the model mentioned by the board during the meeting. So we submitted a package last week with attached decommissioning estimates for both projects, which were based upon the per megawatt numbers in the National Renewable Energy Laboratories report, and plus the 25% adder required by the town's bylaw.
Did anyone get that email? Did anyone get that? I don't remember seeing it. I don't deny you submitted it. I just,
Do you need a copy?
Yeah. I've seen it. I thought it was, on the webpage.
if you send it by email, I'll find it.
Okay.
I'm okay.
We do have a printed copy if you'd like one.
If we need to talk about it. I apologize. I knew it was coming. Got it.
Yeah, I have it.
I've got it. Thank you.
21st.
Thanks, Greg.
Look for it.
So you can see the bond amount, the decommissioning amount was about 2.6 million, so they've been substantially increased since the original approvals.
I'll look at, just as a note, the date on your document is wrong.
It is
Which
wrong.
is, which
Yeah.
is why I didn't find it, because I file it by date, and
My apologies. It takes me about 4 or 5 months to get into the new year, so.
no, it's okay, it's okay.
There was also a request at the last meeting. We mentioned some information on some of the solar recycling programs so we provided that for informational use for the board.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments from the board? First thing that pops into my head, well, there's a couple of things. I was looking at the original approved plans from back in 2020, and I don't see batteries listed on the plans. Did I miss that? Is this something new?
No, they were on the approved plans.
And where were they located? The only thing I saw in the way of boxed out areas, I saw 2 boxed out areas, one that had 4 small rectangles, one that had 2, but they were identified as electrical components.
They're called out as electrical equipment areas, but there are batteries within those.
Is that-
They're not the same style that you might have seen in the past, where it was a large container that had the batteries. These are modular units, so they're smaller and they're connected in series.
Are they contained in anything, or?
They're contained, each individual module is contained within itself.
And does each individual module have a fire suppression system and a cooling system and all of
Yes,
that?
yes, they have individual cooling systems, suppression systems, and they're all monitored like the larger systems are.
And what is their, see, I don't remember, and it has been 2.5 years, so forgive me. I don't remember discussions about batteries connected to that project. Do you remember anything about batteries?
I did go back and read not only the decision document, which didn't talk about batteries,
Right.
but the application, the introduction written to the application said solar and energy storage system. So from that, I inferred, from that introductory sentence
Yep.
in the application, I inferred batteries.
That batteries were involved.
And if you look at the cover sheet to those approved plans, it breaks it down on the system information. It would have the PV information at the top, and then it'll have a section about the energy storage at the bottom.
Okay. And
They're both 4.99 megawatts in size.
4.99 worth of storage?
Yes,
AC.
AC, yes.
Okay. Yeah, could we, now that we're learning that there's a difference, could we always be clear when we talk about that?
Yeah. Kind of a big difference, still.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you
I-
also confirm which side of the meter the batteries are on?
These are DC coupled, so they're behind the meter.
Yeah, we had asked that question before. They're not taking energy off the grid.
Okay, so they're on the project side of the meter, not on
Yes.
the utility side of the meter?
And they'll store excess energy that's produced by the system when it's more than we can send out into the distribution system.
Mr. Chair, question following up on the statement. The enclosure for the battery storage, they're cells, then you build a module, the modules are on a rack, and then there'll be an enclosure around.
Correct.
Right, okay. There's a fire suppression system?
The Powen system that was specified here has a fire suppression option, which we're planning to use.
And is that, what is the suppression
It's a
agent?
dry agent.
Good. It's not going to be water, it's not going to be flushing anything
No.
down into the,
It does have an outside connection that they can connect to extinguish it with water, but that's a
the
separate.
initial suppression will be
Is
a
dry.
dry system.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I guess that's kind of a lead-in to my question.
Great.
So, I've been doing a ton of research, ton of reading on battery storage systems, ton of reading on thermal runaway events that are associated with battery storage systems. And I think my question, well, first off, now that I see the batteries on the layout, batteries, the fire suppression system within the containers isn't always sufficient to suppress a fire. In my talking with fire officials, we've always been under the assumption that you don't use water to put out lithium-ion batteries. You just stand back, let them burn, and wait for, protect the perimeter. After speaking with fire safety and doing some more reading, I learned that that's not the case. So if you have a thermal runaway event, the way it was put to me was, yes, you could put lithium-ion batteries out with water, but it takes copious amounts. And the example he gave me was a new Tesla on the side of the highway burning can be put out with approximately 25,000 gallons of water, which is a ton of water. So then you expand on that to a battery storage system, and now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. So I asked him, point blank, would you use water or would you not? Would you just stand back and watch it burn and just protect the area? And his answer to me was, that's totally up to the first fire officer on scene. If he determines that water is needed, they're gonna put water on it. If he determines that water is not needed, they won't put water on it. So I guess my concern is, and again, in reading, and I'll share the articles with you so that we have them for the record. My concern is the articles that I read about thermal runaway is they were started by a defect in one cell of one battery within one storage container. And then the rest is history. Off it goes. And the cases are, sometimes the suppression system will put it out, sometimes it won't. So if we had a situation where the suppression system didn't handle it, the fire department arrived on scene, the fire officer decided that water was appropriate, they put, and I'm gonna be generous here and say, they put 50,000 gallons of water on it, which I think won't be enough, but I'm trying to be fair as I can. Now you've got damaged batteries, you've got tons of water, and you've got exposed chemicals. Where's all that stuff going? And it's not my fear that this could happen. It is, there's documentation that these things do happen. The batteries do have failures, they do run away. Nobody can guarantee that they won't fail, nobody can guarantee that we won't have a thermal runaway event, nobody can guarantee the Wareham Fire Department won't put water on it. None of those things are a given. So if all of those happen and we put 50,000 gallons of fresh water on top of damaged batteries and it washes all those chemicals away, it's headed right for the groundwater. And I think that would be one of my concerns, is how do we protect the citizens from what is realistically an event that could happen. It's not a chicken little, the sky's falling on my head type of theory. It could happen. No different than the tragedy out in Ohio with the railway car. I mean, nobody wanted it to happen, nobody planned for it to happen, but yet it happened anyway. So, for me, that's a concern. And I never realized, and shame on me, that I didn't pay more attention to that first cover page where you pointed out that there's storage. I missed that. All I saw was plans and electrical components. So now, this gives me pause. So many things have evolved over the past 2.5 years. Are we missing something? Is there something that we need to be looking at closer?
I have a follow-on statement. I also have been doing a significant amount of research, and some of this may end up being questions to you. The first point I want to make is all of the research that I've done says that comparing lithium batteries in cell phones, which we have many notable fires that get a lot of press, batteries in Tesla, and batteries that are on my RV, lithium batteries, the technology is fundamentally different than the technology in the energy storage system. Is that correct?
I don't know that I'm competent to answer that question. I know that these systems are designed as modular units, so that it's.
I was talking about the battery chemistry, even
The
there.
chemistry, I'm not aware of.
Okay, so anyway, I found articles that say that that they should be thought of differently. The other thing that I've been researching, I have only found one large thermal runaway project in the United States associated with a solar installation. And it may not even have been associated with solar. It may have been a large scale. And it was in 2019 in Arizona. 3 people were badly injured, but that's the only one I can find in the United States. Are you aware of how many thermal runaway events associated with solar projects?
I'm not, but I have heard of that one in
The
Arizona.
one in Arizona is the one that gets a lot of press. I also found a database that talks about these issues. There's only been 50 events recorded in the database since 2012 worldwide, and they were not all associated with solar. They were all associated with lithium batteries.
Lithium batteries, correct.
So, again, we need to think about,
Were they all on a scale of what?
the scale is listed there. I didn't
Yeah,
print
the
it out
scale
there.
of the battery systems that I looked at ranged from slightly larger than what they're doing to quite,
In the database, they were all, they weren't iPhone batteries, they were larger scale.
Larger than Tesla batteries.
oh, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
considerably.
But they were not all associated with solar, they were not all the same chemistry. So again, we need to think about that. The incident in Arizona did not result in any groundwater contamination, although there was significant off-gassing and things like that.
Right. Which that part of it also concerns me a little bit, because you can't control the noxious fumes.
Right.
Once they're in the atmosphere, you know,
Right.
Mother Nature takes it over from there.
Okay, so we need to take into account that as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am?
note that in another one of our pending cases, the Zero Route 25 case, there was a submission made by Ms. Harrelson of some testimony submitted in a battery storage case that goes through a number of instances of accidents associated with battery storage. I think that information might be helpful to look through as we try to get our arms around this issue.
Very good.
Well, just to point out also, these projects, when they received their permits, did go through an extensive peer review. I'm not trying to be rude, but I was just scrolling through all the materials that I have on here, and I do believe that culminated, the fire department was consulted in that process, and they issued a letter before the projects
No,
were approved.
Their letter only states that access to the battery systems is sufficient. It doesn't state anything about how they would treat a fire should one happen.
However, none of that is on the record and can't be part of our decision. And if they didn't submit a letter saying that, we really can't consider hearsay.
Correct. Right. The only letter that we have from them states that they have adequate access to the project. That's all that the fire department has weighed in on.
So they're not going to, I asked for a clarification, they're not going to send another letter to us?
The conversation that I had with fire was not backed up with a letter.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not quite sure why. I did, the question came, oh no, I think it was 025 as far as the location of the battery, but not so much how a fire event would
Or
be happening.
their input, okay, all right.
Mike, do you have any comment?
No, this battery technology is, I think a lot of it's fairly new to us. As every solar project comes up, it seems like the technology has changed. It's hard for us to keep abreast of what's going on. My concern is when they say burnout, is where's the containment for the water? most of our places are in sensitive areas. We're gonna have water, water bleed off, or it's gonna drain someplace if there's no containment area to, retain that water so it can be treated. Are we creating a monster? 5 years from now, we're gonna say, oh geez, we made a mistake, an oversight got by us, and it's after the fact, and we get it in our groundwater. We live on a single source aquifer. That's something to think about.
Jane? You good? Sam?
I'm not sure why we don't require drills testing on every site. I mean, it is a single source aquifer. I don't think anybody can pinpoint exactly where it is in town, exactly. And, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but 025, you can walk to a pump station. I know that they said it doesn't go in that
We
direction.
shouldn't really talk about that case in this.
No, I'm using it as an example
Right.
only.
So if we need to improve the protections, we need to update the requirements.
Yep. That's just my opinion. I know Derek sent a letter to us all. I've discussed it with Carl. He doesn't, not Carl, Ken.
Ken,
Yeah, Carl.
yeah. Dave Requena, you mean?
No, Ken.
Oh,
I discussed with Ken, he didn't think we needed it. I do,
okay.
for those very reasons.
Okay.
I did share, I think, with some members of the planning board, unrelated to this case, but there is a change, either approved or pending in the state law, which has changed 40A, Section 3, that now says that, I think it was there, that clarifies that battery storage systems are considered by the Attorney General to be part of a solar system, and we have to be very cautious
Cognizant of that?
about how we review and approve that. That's now part of the state law, I believe. 2120, was that H?
That's not a state law yet, that was,
Oh, it's just a bill pending.
it was an opinion of the
Oh, is it a court opinion? Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought it was an Attorney General opinion
Case.
with regard to bylaws developed by the town of Wendell.
Right.
That included battery storage component. And that a narrow reading of that would be that the town, when submitting the bylaws with respect to battery storage, didn't justify them in any way. And I think the Attorney General's office concluded that they were part of the solar facility. I guess I would just say that even given that, if the considerations relate to the health, safety, and welfare of the town, I think that really trumps the question of whether it's part of a solar facility or not. I think that this board's consideration needs to determine whether the health, safety, and welfare, is going to be adversely affected by a battery storage system.
I agree.
Just to follow on that, then the point I think the Attorney General raised is that the justification or substantiation of how the health, safety, and welfare was put at risk was not clearly stated.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, gentlemen?
We'd appreciate the board's consideration. Our request essentially is to extend the lapse period or recognize an extension of the lapse period due to the length of time it required us to go through the group study. And, these projects did go through an extensive review process. I understand things change, but we think these were designed and approved according to the town's bylaws, and we'd like to move into the next phase to build them.
Mr. Chair, I did have one, I forgot to ask this question. Big news article this week about a number of New Leaf projects being sold. Was this project sold to a new owner?
No,
Wait,
not as part of that
wait,
transaction.
you're shaking your head, yes? No, the answer's,
No, not other than what was outlined in our original letters.
no, Borrego sold it to New Leaf or spun it off, but this was New Leaf selling a whole bunch of New York and Massachusetts projects to yet another
Yeah, the
company.
press release that you're referencing is not, this project, these projects are not part of that.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. We're
They're
not-
they're not part of that transaction. Is this project slated to be part of a future transaction?
They were sold,
They were community solar
yeah,
projects,
they were
right?
sold more than a year ago, which was detailed in, I think, the very
Oh,
first
we
letter
had that. I didn't tie the two events together. So, not related to what we're talking about, we can move on.
That's right.
You beat me to that question, too, by the way. I'm going to scratch that off my list.
I had it on my list. Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Quirk, I thought you had one or two questions you were going to raise around good cause, or you're not? That's not an issue.
I am thinking that another consultation with town council would be a good idea at this point.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we close whatever this portion of the meeting is and move to deliberations amongst ourselves, which we don't have to take up tonight.
We don't have to
but-
take up a
But
vote.
we don't have to, I don't think we're going to take any more evidence
No, I don't think so.
from the applicant, unless Mr. Buckland has a thought, or?
If I'm not mistaken, we have 60-day window to render a decision.
No, this is not a hearing, it doesn't have the time limit.
So what is the time? There is no time limit?
No, there is no time limit. It's based on what the applicant and you agree is the time for that decision to be made.
Okay.
So I would like to, as part of this motion, propose that we have a separate workshop, which would be an open meeting,
Yep.
where we could actually just discuss amongst ourselves,
With no more input, just discussion of what's been
so
presented.
we can each get our minds around,
Yep, I agree. And I'd like to,
or, go ahead.
I'd like to echo Sherry's point about having another consultation with,
Yeah, but because this isn't a public hearing, we can take input from town council.
right?
I guess
think.
my only question about not taking any more information is that, Mike, I think you said that you have relied on information you have researched. And I think for the sake of the record, it would be good for your research to be part of the record.
Then I will also position that document I sent out about the large-scale battery storage systems and the risks, which I did think I submitted, but I don't know if it made it to the board. Yes.
And for the sake of our minute taker, at some point, it would be good for us to list out these documents that were,
You want to read that?
I can reference that now. So the large-scale project that had the event in Arizona was published in Drivewire by Industry Drive on July 29, 2020. The title is APS says runaway thermal event caused 2019 battery explosion.
Okay.
Outlines 4 steps to avoid a repeat.
Yeah, that's not the document I'm referring to.
That's the one that I read up on.
All right, so I will,
And then my second source of information concerning battery hazard is from the ACS publications, and it was titled Battery Hazards for Large Energy Storage Systems, dated July 25, 2022.
all right, the document, to read into the record, the document I was referring to, which I believe I distributed, let me get to the title page. Energy storage systems based on the IBC, IFC, IRC, and NEC, published by IAEI, dated, I can give you the ISBN if you want. It's the International Code Council, and what is the date? It's copyrighted 2022, and the ISBN is 978-1-212-04-0 or -3, which is a downloadable PDF version.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just trying to understand what the expected process would be on this.
Well, what we would do tonight is we would take a motion to set up and date a workshop for the board. Would be a public meeting, but with no public input. And we would discuss at length all of the information that has been absorbed, both from the proponent side and from the folks in town with concerns, and then prepare ourselves to vote yes or no to offer you with the requested continuance.
Excuse me, and so the information that you'd consider would be, there would be no further information other than what you just referenced tonight?
And perhaps...
And perhaps input from legal
Okay.
counsel. But that would be just strictly for clarification for us, just so that we understand our responsibility and position concerning the documentation that's been provided to us.
Is that a workshop that you want us to participate in?
No, there would be...
Well, it's open meeting, so you're certainly
I
welcome
mean, you
to...
could certainly sit and watch, or dial in and Zoom and watch. But,
No, I
and
appreciate it.
there'd be no more input, either from your side or from the opposition. I mean, so there's no fear of additional information coming in that would derail or attempt to derail your position.
Thank you. That's why I was just trying to get clarification on what the expectation was.
So is that a motion, or Sherry, you
Excuse me,
had a
Mr. Chairman, you extended an invitation to the opposition to read into the record.
This is not a public hearing.
So you invited us to come here tonight because our public comments have not been posted. This is the email where you invited us to come.
Is that the email that was sent out by 67 people?
No, this was an email that was sent by you to me, sir.
No, I'm talking about the comments that you're referencing.
No, they're the comments that
All
you
right.
submitted and were never filed,
It-
and therefore wouldn't be in the record.
Mr. Cosgrove, if you want to come up and give me the documentation that you're referring to, I'll read it into the record, and we'll make sure it's posted to the public.
Thank you very much.
I thought Jonathan said you did post it, or did you not post it?
No, it's all right, you can just,
No, no,
I'll take it.
I've read your email, just so you know.
Yeah, I read this one, too.
You just want to read it.
I just want to read it
Read the
into the
title.
record.
Yeah, we're not going to read the whole.
So, just for the record, Mr. Cosgrove has presented the board with the citizens opposed to extensions of 27 and 150, care of Barry C. Cosgrove, 49 Blackmore Pond Circle, West Wareham, 02576. This document will be, if it's not already uploaded to the project site, for both public consumption and consumption of the proponent.
I believe it's up already.
I believe you sent an
I
email
thought it
saying
was,
it was.
I thought
haven't
it was
checked.
up too, but let me take a peek. It's the one that came out yesterday and today. Now, Mr. Cosgrove is correct, this one's not up yet. So I'll make sure that this gets up right away. And this is dated March 23, 2023. So a copy okay, a copy to you, Jonathan? Yes, I didn't get that. Okay. Well, just so there's no misunderstanding.
Do you want to proceed with one?
I'd like to ask a question.
I'm assuming, Mr. Cosgrove, you've got no opposition to me supplying a copy to the proponent, since how it's going to become a public record. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to move to set a date for a workshop via a public meeting to further discuss all of the documentation presented on behalf of this project.
You have your calendar?
I
You can
do,
set
I
a date
remember.
certain?
I remember that.
Would you mind if I asked just one quick question? And please don't take this the wrong way. This is genuine curiosity here, but what is the goal of the workshop? I'm asking just because this is, when we left last time, we were responding to two very specific asks. We had agreed to the NREL numbers in exchange for acknowledgement of the extension. We were asked to write out the equation for number of megawatts times the per megawatt number, and we were asked to provide some information on disposal of modules at end of life. We've done that. The original permits went through a peer review and a review of the fire department. I don't know, and so I'm asking with genuine curiosity, the goal of this workshop would be to understand what about the batteries?
The goal of the workshop would be to dive deeper into the concern about a potential battery failure and the after effects should it happen and should water be used, and to gain more information from legal counsel on our position concerning our options as far as granting the extension based on extenuating circumstances in the Plymouth study that you cite as the delay.
So, Mr. Chairman, then I withdraw my motion because my motion wasn't that narrow. We haven't really, as a group.
Well, we're free to discuss anything and
Well,
everything
but that was
that's
the
been
purpose.
presented.
So that was the purpose, not specific. My motion wasn't specific to batteries.
And it doesn't have to be.
All right, I'm just saying
my-
that wasn't my intent.
My intent for the meeting is for us as a group to discuss everything that's been presented, to deliberate on it, to come to a rational conclusion without having to interact with anybody else.
Got it.
You know, we're not allowed to do that. You know, we can't get together over a coffee tomorrow and say, all right, let's hash this out. It's got to be done in a public hearing, so that's what it's going to be all about.
I'll try not to take that personally.
That was more what I was thinking. We haven't really had a chance to interact with one another.
Right.
I'm sorry, that was my intention. We haven't really had a chance to interact with one another. And,
Because we can't.
yeah, because we can't. And while I may have an opinion, some member of the board maybe can influence that opinion.
Okay. I will just say that, that's very helpful from my understanding. I will just say that, the only thing that I worry about in that circumstance is, you Google the 3 worst disasters that have ever happened with batteries and then print it out and go in a room and talk about it. I do want, I want to offer, in the event that anything comes out of that research that you want expert opinions on or us to respond to, we're an open and willing audience for that, so.
Okay.
All right, so our upcoming meetings.
Excuse me, if I could just add, are you, for example, if we were to decide that we needed assistance from an expert, would you all be willing to help us to pay for that?
I don't see why not,
Depends on
yeah.
the context of we've done that on plenty of occasions, so it would.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. And I just want to say also, I have appreciated the attitude that you all have brought to this proceeding. I think the information that you've provided us and the level of cooperation, I think, has been good. So I know this is probably going in a direction that that maybe you didn't anticipate, but it's part of a process that I think we feel we need to follow.
Yeah.
And I think you've heard throughout that we're learning so much more through this process that we don't want to make a mistake. I think one of the quotes, I don't know, I'm going to butcher this quote. It was from the Kentucky was trying to struggle with legislation, and the quote was, "We don't want to leave our farmers' children with a mess 25 years from now. We won't be here, but we don't want to leave the farmers' children or the citizens of our town with something we just didn't understand."
I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we're trying to balance your right as a developer, the landowner's right, and the welfare, health, welfare, and safety of the town. I mean, that's the goal, and it has to be kept in that mind. You know, you can't have development at the risk of the health, welfare, and safety of the town. You gotta make sure that you're doing the right thing. I've said it over and over again. I don't wanna end up on the front page of the Wareham Weekly. It's not my goal. I don't wanna be there.
Neither do we.
Right. So,
We won't be here, but
yeah,
Well, that's the problem. None of us are going to be here 20 years from now when this
right.
next decision point
But my
occurs.
son might be in town.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were moving to Portugal.
I am, but he might be here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so entertain a motion to
Is there-
arrange workshop for, and we're gonna do obviously an off cycle. So we have Monday, April 3, or Monday, April 17. I'm available for either one, so it doesn't
I'm
matter to
open
me.
for either one, so I'll make the motion for whichever date you want.
third,
I
or the
move,
earliest.
I move that we schedule a workshop to deliberate on
April 3.
April
April 3rd, to deliberate on the extension requests for 0720, 27 Charge Pond Road, and 0920, 150 Tohonet Road, to come to some kind of
Conclusion.
meeting.
Decision.
Meeting of the minds or whatever.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye, with the proviso, we're gonna try to get with Rich, presumably,
Beforehand?
this week, yes.
Maybe we can schedule this Thursday, if you're available, because I'm in
I'll see
town
if I
this
can
week.
be.
so-
All right, well, so if you guys can't meet with them, we'll just switch to the 17th. Mike, you could,
You want it?
Well, we have to-
okay with
you
the
have-
17th? Yeah, we really have to pick a date tonight.
but you have to publish it by Thursday, if we're not gonna make it for the 3rd. Because the 3rd is the next Monday, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so,
Might be too tight.
well, no, I mean, we just have to get the agenda and the notice out.
Okay. All right, so,
But if you don't meet with Rich by Thursday, then just post it for the 17th.
okay.
We don't have 2 weeks to it's gotta be 2 weeks?
No,
1 week,
48 hours
48,
Yeah,
okay.
48.
for meeting
Yeah,
notice.
Yep.
It's not a public hearing, it's just a meeting
Yeah,
notice.
okay, got it.
Just so we also understand that where this goes from here, is the 3rd or the 17th, and then we should just watch the agendas for the meeting after that to be, you guys would offer a readout on whatever you come up with at the workshop at the next,
Yeah, we would have to take a vote for,
Right. At that point, we would schedule the next available official planning board meeting and
For a vote.
and make the vote public then. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Point of order, I believe it's,
You-
I'm sorry, April 17th is a holiday. It's Patriots Day.
It's not noted as such on my planner.
that's because it's only a holiday
It's
in
not a
Massachusetts.
It's only in Massachusetts, and it's only for people that work for the state. That's why I don't know it. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna shoot for the 3rd, as motioned.
Okay.
So all in favor of the motion by Carl Schultz and seconded by Sam Corbett to schedule the workshop meeting for April 3? Sherry
Aye.
Clerk? Mike? Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
time.
What time, 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock, yep.
And we'll just have to get some, Jonathan, can you help schedule a room and the Zoom? We don't have to meet in this room, we could meet, I mean, if this room's available, great, but otherwise we can meet in.
Yeah, we can always meet upstairs, was it 20?
27. They have Zoom over there. Ken can train you how to run a
But
Zoom.
we gotta make sure the space.
That's what I meant, we have to schedule a room. Even I can run a Zoom in that meeting.
Yeah, 27 might not be, the room might not be big enough. If
Well,
it-
no, it's not a public, it's a workshop.
Oh, so, yeah, but you still got to make it available for people to watch. Even though they can't,
There's room in there for people to watch, and there's room in there for, there's the setup for the Zoom as
for
well.
the Zoom. Okay, yeah, as long as there's sufficient way for people to take it in, then that's good. 50. Okay. Where's my agenda? Okay, next up, public hearings, proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 2023 Springtown meeting, Article 921, table of parking regulations, changing the number of parking spaces for vehicle service bays from 2 to 5 spaces per bay. Was this brought forth by the zoning officer?
No, this was brought forth by the zoning board of
ZBA.
appeals. They have an application before them right now for a vehicle service station, and they've been dealing with other vehicle service areas previously. And I've gotten to know them pretty well, and they don't think that the allowance for, or the requirement for a minimum of 2 spaces per bay is enough. Because you think of, they have an inspection system there at the service station that you have more than 2 cars waiting for inspections typically. And what they found was that 5 spaces was more appropriate for the service. Because they also have cars that are being serviced there would be parked as well, taking up spaces there. So their belief was that the two requirement for 2 parking spaces per bay was not sufficient to handle the operation of a vehicle service station.
Mike, while
I'm
you're...
not quite understanding, though.
So I was going to ask, the impact of this is that future service stations would have to use more property because they'd have to have more lots available.
You have to have more parking spaces available.
Right, so
that's right.
it only affects future projects, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the net effect would be that service stations, depending on the number of bays, would be required to have more spaces in the future than they are today.
That's correct. Instead of 2 spaces per bay, it
Would be 5.
5.
And there are parking spaces that are the standard, the 9.5
9
feet by 18?
That's right.
Yeah.
Minimum of 9.5 by 18 feet.
Okay.
I understand
I understand the rationale. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple places in town where, the only concern that I would
This is
have-
only future.
No,
Doesn't-
I
it's not
understand that.
retroactive.
You still base your experiences on what you see. My only concern, I guess, would be you end up with a sea of cars waiting to be repaired. So now you've got, 20, 30, 40, 50 cars on a lot, which, depending on how big a service center is proposed,
I doubt there'd be that many, but, because you have to have a certain number of
service space.
people working them as well, too.
I'm just thinking, obviously, you said there was something coming up, so there's obviously a project that's driving this particular request.
Well, there's a project under review right now that they're having difficulty trying to find the parking on the site before. And the Board of Appeals has experience in going through other vehicle service areas as well, and it found it problematic in private.
change the variance, they can still grant the variance, this is just for the future.
There's a member here from the Board of Appeals, Richard Temple, who maybe would like to explain it more from his perspective as a Board of Appeals member.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Richard Semple, 194 Hathaway Street, Wareham, Zoning Board of Appeals. Our issue is on paper, two spots, sounds all right, but if you drive around and you look at all these service areas, any garage, they've got lots next door full of cars. They got all these areas full of cars waiting, some can't be repaired, some waiting to be repaired. And it turns into what you can see if you go through Onset and look at some of them, you go through West Wareham and look at all these areas that they're working on cars. And an inspection station, I can't see, maybe inspection station, if you could come in and go out, that would be one thing. But we've got an inspection station / garage going in. So you got to look at the employees, the amount of cars, people coming and going to pick up hazardous waste as far as oil, drain oil, all this.
No,
It just doesn't, just for the future of this, to stop what we're getting, we need to look at, can't be fit in these little garages in these small areas. That's what our proposal is for that.
You okay? Good. No, I do understand. I've spent my entire life in the automobile industry, so I know exactly what you're saying.
But it just, when you say two spots, there's more that goes through just two parking spots per bay.
Yep.
Every day. It's just
Now,
too tight of a corridor to keep that up.
Is the proposed 5 spots per bay strictly for customer parking, or is one of those spots going to be chewed up by an employee?
Well, that's why we wanted to go more, because the employees weren't being counted.
Yep. Okay. Questions, comments?
idea.
Sherry? Mike? Mike, you got that look on your face, man.
Well, there's a lot of guys that are starting out with a two-bay garage. So now you're gonna tell me if I had a two-bay garage, I need minimum 10 spaces. Gonna put a cramp on a lot of people, you know. It's not fair. You know, precedent's been set already. I think there's other ways of controlling the parking in a repair shop. I can think of quite a few that are overflowed.
Yeah, I know of one right off the top of my head, but
Yeah, I
we're not
probably
going to
the
mention
same way,
names
yeah.
tonight.
I believe that they've made arrangements with neighboring lots, so it's okay. But when you try to put them in little tight neighborhoods where there is no lots, there's gonna be overspill. I don't, it's gonna happen.
Mr. Chairman, I like the idea. I've actually gotten bollocksed up in an inspection station. Doesn't, but unintended consequence, if you have a 2-bay garage, requires 10 parking spaces.
Right.
It's now subject to special permit.
It creates a brand-new problem.
Not a new problem, it's just a new step.
Unintended
Over 9 parking spaces requires a special permit.
Vehicle service requires a site plan review by the zoning board of appeals anyway.
Yeah, but this would be a special permit by planning board, over 9 parking spaces.
Only if there is not a requirement for a zoning board of appeals action, in which case it goes to the board of appeals.
Okay, I didn't read the bylaw that way. It's okay, I'm okay with what your interpretation is, but I didn't read I'll have to go back and read the requirement again.
Yeah, it is dependent on whether or not there's another permit necessary.
All right, well, that's good. I think it's a good idea, I'm just,
Okay, let's take that one step further. If I had, say I had a two-bay station, I had 6 spaces, I wanted to sell my business, change of, somebody else buys it. Are they in trouble, or are they grandfathered in?
Your grandfathered in
it's a
pre-existing.
previously non-conforming use.
Thank
So
you.
the address is
I'm
grandfathered.
trying to learn.
The address is grandfathered, not the owner.
It's a land.
Right.
It goes with the land.
Right, okay. So we're not going to unintentionally destroy someone's business that already exists, even though they may be the driving force for this change.
It's just the betterment for neighborhoods and everybody else
No,
around
I understand
them.
the intent. What I'm saying.
We're not trying to blackball anybody or ruin anybody's life.
I know that wasn't the
I
question I
agree with
asked.
what you're saying.
So I'm thinking and I don't even know the name of the shop, but when you come into Onset from Wareham, it's a little two-bay garage, got a couple spots out front, not a lot. If this goes forward, it doesn't adversely affect him at all, because he's been there. It just affects a brand-new facility or a brand-new use, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right,
I wonder if there has been any consideration given to the transiency or static nature of the use of those 5 spots or the 2 spots that they're required to have. Like, if there are cars that are coming in for service and they're staying there for weeks on end, that causes a problem because it fills up a spot that could be used by
right, well,
somebody who's transient, who's there for a couple of hours to get an inspection done. And I just wonder if that's been considered in the sort of picking 5 spaces as a number. And I don't know how you would police that or anything. I just
you can't.
wonder if it's a,
you wouldn't be able to police it. I mean, I think, I understand what they're getting at. Like I said,
I do too.
I've been in this business my entire life, so I get it.
Mhm.
And you have some operations where they'll tow a car in, and the car will sit there for literally weeks or months on end, waiting for a resolution to an unpaid tow bill or whatever. And then you have little small shops that aren't in the tow business that, you know, a car might be there for a week or two trying to get a hard-to-find part.
But that's the owner's problem. If he's gonna take up a bay, he loses a bay. I mean, the parking spot.
Right.
So it's on him or her.
Yeah, that would be a tough thing to deal with, because you can't have Nancy come in needing a starter for her Camry, and the starter's on back order, and the Camry sits there for, 2, 3, 4 days a week, and the supplier says, well, it's gonna be a month before they're available, and you gotta call Nancy and say, hey, tow your car out of here. When the starter's in, I'll call you and you can tow it back.
It's doing business.
It should be the last time she'd go there, I think. But I do get what you're doing, so,
sorry, I'm
I-
just trying to think on my feet here.
Mhm.
Just wondering if that was something that was considered.
And has anybody given any concern over these shops that are using an adjacent lot as far as stormwater runoff from leaking fluids and things of that nature? I mean, I would think that would be an issue all in itself.
It's another
Well,
issue.
you want to make it bigger, we can obviously make it bigger, but we were just looking at the situation that we had in front of us.
Yep.
And I agree that all this stormwater, all this runoff, everything from all these leaky vehicles are going to go somewhere.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Regarding the runoff,
Like your last, when you said 50,000 gallons of water, were you going to hold that until it's not contaminated anymore?
right.
regarding the runoff, last time meeting, we passed the MS4 regulations, which control the impact of polluted stormwater.
Yeah, and?
So that would be how that's addressed at the service station.
But what if
They
it's
still have to
sitting on
comply.
adjacent property?
If it's sitting on a property next door, that's not the service station. You got an empty lot next to Joe's Auto Service, and Joe comes to you and says, hey, I need somewhere to park cars, and you say, fine, $500 a month, and,
That's not a permitted use.
well, I know sort of, but you don't think it
It's
happens?
all over
The
town.
enforcement officer needs to
Okay.
enforce that.
Yeah, we don't even want to head down that road. Okay. As long as it's not going to affect existing shops, I'm okay with it. It's only going to be in the future. And if the permit goes with the shop and not with the current owner, then future owners of that little two-bay shop aren't going to be adversely affected. It's only going to be the guy that wants to open a brand-new shop.
I think that puts a hardship on him before he even starts.
I think it reverts back to, that argument that I was using with the solar company, the health, welfare, and safety of the residents.
Exactly.
To have a parking
Exactly.
lot full dilapidated cars clogging up, you know, get people getting in and getting out safely to get their cars fixed, to get their cars inspected, vendors dropping off parts, Safety Clean picking up waste oil.
I mean, if these things were going in the industrial park or anywhere that neighbors and citizens of this town don't want to look at them, that would be fine. You could just put all you want out there in the industrial parks, but that's not where these things go. They're going right in neighborhoods, and you have resident people that should be considered. I know Mr. Baptiste was saying, you know, you're putting a guy that wants to open a bay up already up against the odds. The neighbors count too.
So,
Always the neighbors count in this town.
just, Rich, a clarification. You say these are going in residential areas? They're not permitted in residential
Well,
districts?
I'm just saying, okay, commercial, mixed use
Okay,
areas.
yeah, no, I was concerned if they're going in a residential. Yeah, no, they're permitted in Wareham Village 1, Overlay 1, and those as of right, and special permit, as Ken said, in the CS and CG zones. But they're as of right in the village, the two villages.
Yeah, we haven't seen too many of those, though.
Well, this would pretty much stop somebody from opening a shop in the village.
Yeah, it would,
It's too much space.
You know, it just eats up too much space.
that's right.
Okay.
Okay,
We didn't open the public hearing. We were supposed to open the public hearing.
yeah, we did.
Did you vote to open the public hearing?
No, I didn't have to vote.
Okay. Procedural.
Procedural, yep.
Okay.
Okay, so now that the public hearing is open and we've heard testimony, is there anybody from the public that would like to weigh in? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody online? Okay.
I move that we close the public hearing on this issue, Article 921.
Do we have a second? We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett, to close the public hearing on Article 921. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Public meeting is closed.
I move that the planning board recommend to, who do we recommend it to? The select board?
Town meeting.
Recommend at town meeting that we endorse, support?
Support.
Support Article 921, table, changes to the table of parking regulations.
Second.
We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
No.
Jane?
Yes.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So the 510. He left already. I was gonna thank him, but he's gone. Continued public hearings. What's that?
He's in the back row.
Is it? Wrong glasses again.
Rich is still here.
There he is. Thank you for coming, sir. You looked like Annie Hayes there for a second. Said you looked like Annie Hayes for a second. I had the wrong glasses on. Okay, continued public hearing, 33-21 Wareham PV1 LLC, 0 Route 25, solar energy generation facility. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Okay. What do we got?
Well, again, as through the process, we've tried to help comply with the standards of the bylaw, and educate the board as we go forward and help the
Trying to
board do
introduce
it.
yourself again.
Oh, excuse me. John Clavens, Clavens Law Group, Counsel for Long Road Energy.
Matt Thornton, Director of Development, Long Road Energy.
And on Zoom, we have Sarah Ebaugh, professional engineer from VHB.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, I think to echo our comments from the previous project, my concern, I have a couple concerns. One is your intent to readdress the decommissioning value at the time that you get building permits. I have a problem with that only because it seems to me and this is only my opinion, and don't take it wrong, but it seems like you're just placating us. You know, it's like, here's what you want, go away, and then plan on arguing that it should be reduced at the time that you apply for your building permits. And I don't see the value in that for the town. On that front, I would have to state my opinion, which is the decommissioning value, if agreed upon by the board, it is what it is, and at the 5-year mark, we address it then. I wouldn't be of the opinion of getting back together with so-called experts to determine whether or not it's accurate and fair at the time of building permits. The other concern that I have, again, is the batteries. As we discussed with the previous project, and I think it's even more of a concern for me on this project site, is there's no way for anyone, much less you, to guarantee the town that there won't be a defect in a battery that ends up in a battery storage module, that ends up on this project, that ends up as a thermal event, that ends up with the town fire department putting water on it, which ends up flushing all kinds of contaminants into the groundwater. It's not, again, it's not an unfounded fear. There, we've documented the thermal events in the country. Yeah, they're few and far between, but they happen. And that series of events, although the odds are against it, are possible. And that wears on me as far as my intent to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the town. So, for me, like I said, that's kind of an issue for me. Just so it's restated, because we stated for the other project, I did speak with Wareham Fire. They did confirm for me that lithium can be put out with water. It takes a lot of water, and that there's no way to determine whether the first fire officer on scene will elect to use it or not elect to use it. In the words of the fire official, totally his call. There's no written policy that says don't put water on it, or don't put water on it, or put water on it under these conditions. It's, you show up, something's ablaze, and in that moment you make the decision whether or not to apply water. So that all is problematic for me. And I don't know, unless somebody on the board has a way to address how we control that problem, I don't know where we go with that.
Can we work with them to not use water? That's the biggest issue. I mean, if it's,
It wasn't, the discussion I had, they were pretty adamant in the fact that it's the first fire officer's call. They make the call.
what if they know that that's the worst thing they could do?
And are you going to hamstring the fire department?
Yeah,
Are they gonna-
I don't feel comfortable.
I don't-
There are all kinds of government and regulatory and fire people working on this issue, so I would hope that they would always use best available knowledge.
Analysis,
Yeah, so I appreciate the idea, but I don't want to tell the fire department how to put out a fire. I'm uncomfortable.
I do. It's a single source aquifer that is my big issue on this, on all of them. I think we should test wells on every project. And I know their person said, well, the water goes this way. If he's wrong and the water's that way, that's a problem. And everything we've investigated says the worst thing they could do is put water on it, and especially on a single source aquifer. And I know technology is changing, something may happen tomorrow. But right now, we know the worst they could do is put water on it. I understand what they're saying, and I'm not capable of telling them what to do. They know a whole lot more than I do, but I know a whole lot more about solar than they may do. And that's the worst thing they could do,
Right.
is put water on
But
it.
for me anyway, I think I would have to echo Carl's concern that for whatever reason, I don't know, I personally don't know how many fire officers are in town, but say there's 5 that are at captain's rank, or whatever the rank is that goes and runs a fire operation. And they've had their meeting, they've discussed this potential problem. 2 years later, this officer is gone, a new officer comes in, and that information isn't transferred down the line. Then we have an oops. And I think it goes back to the series of events. I don't think you can guarantee that won't happen. It may be the best intentions, but I don't think there's a guarantee that you could say absolutely positively water will never be applied to a battery fire.
You never say never, but if you know it's the worst thing you could do versus even standing back and letting it burn is an option, which at one point we were told that's what we'll do. We just let it burn. That's a better option than pouring water on it.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's still a bad situation because with it burning, you're emitting toxic fumes
Right.
into the atmosphere for which you can't control.
Right.
So,
But I can control the water.
right, but you can't control the toxic fumes, which are there because the batteries are there. Should the battery...
I understand, but as you've said right along, part of our job is safety and welfare of the single source aquifer, that if it's tainted, then where are you gonna get water?
Well,
Little
no,
bottles?
my statement was health, welfare, and safety of the citizens, not health, welfare, and safety of the water for the citizens. I mean, the toxic fumes are also
I agree 100%.
potential safety issue.
Yep.
So that's my concern right now at this point.
Excuse me, I didn't hear him again because you were talking, you were confusing me with somebody else. Is this an open meeting?
It will be. I'll invite you when we're ready, yes. Sherry, do you have anything?
Well, I guess one thing is, Mike, if these are your concerns, I would suggest, just as you did in the last case, that you put the results of your research into the record here so that it exists in this case as well as in the other one.
I can do that. I just got to refine them because I closed them up. But luckily, they were in my inbox. I hate Gmail. As soon as I find it, I'll read
Okay.
it back in.
I can move on to
Oh,
other things if you
Here-
want.
Here it is, I found it. So the first is the ACS Publications dated July 25, 2022. And the second reference is the APS Runaway Thermal Event, titled APS says Runaway Thermal Event Caused 2019 Battery Explosion, and that is dated July 29, 2020. So those were my 2 points of reference. And then the concern about the water is in reference to a conversation with Wareham Fire.
Yeah, and in regards to the APS event 2019, D&V, an independent engineer, did a full site assessment based on those events, and determined that there were no contaminants, or I guess the levels of contaminants were deemed to be non-toxic, and no soil remediation was required. So we can provide to you all that report as part of the understanding process, but tying thermal runaway to soil contamination directly, may not be accurate.
Well, it would be if water was used. These events are not trying to tie the use of water to putting them out to contaminating the soil. Their purpose is to illustrate that these batteries fail.
Mm-hmm.
That was my point with these two stories, is that the possibility of a battery on site failing and causing a fire or a thermal runaway is a possibility. It's not fantasy. It can happen.
Right.
That was the
Understood.
reasoning for it.
But I think we're all aligned in doing everything we can to prevent that from happening.
Right, because in addition to being fair to development, we want to make sure we're taking care of the residents. They're the ones that live here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, I actually looked carefully through the materials submitted by Catherine Harrelson that were the direct pre-filed testimony submitted to the Energy Facility Siting Board relating to the Cranberry Point Energy Storage Facility. And I even read through other things that they referenced, because again, I share Longwood's concern. We're here because we're trying to protect the environment from climate change, not trying to create environmental problems, much less liability for Long Road or any problems for this board or the citizens of the town. So in looking through that, a couple of things. One, Cranberry Point is 150 megawatts, really a much more sizable battery energy storage system than what would be the small system here, only 2 megawatts. So it's 75 times bigger. Most of the accidents they referred to were referencing really large battery energy storage facilities of 150 all the way up to 400 megawatts, where you can imagine a small thing going wrong leading to a much bigger problem. I also looked at a study following one of the very few incidents of a thermal runaway, and one of the points they made was not that you shouldn't have such facilities, but they should be outfitted with better safety features. So venting to allow or to prevent the buildup of gas within a container, although having a container housing the battery units is actually a good idea, because it can help prevent anything from escaping that container in the event of a fire. The cooling systems, the fire suppression systems, also good communications with fire safety. I think where you've permitted, and you have permitted in multiple instances, solar plus storage facilities, there's always been a condition to require consultation, training of Wareham Fire Department. So I think that even in your past practice, Mr. Corbett, there's already a space for robust discussions about what the fire department's response should be to any rare incidents of this. In terms of where these concerns should lead, I think they should lead to reasonable conditions, but allowing the project. If the perspective is, because there's some small chance of an accident, then somehow that can't be permitted. There would be any number of uses allowed in town, above-ground storage tanks, below-ground storage tanks, the municipal maintenance facility, any number of things where things could go wrong, but by and large, the approach should be, well, how can we make sure they're as safe as they could be? And that's what our commitment is. So I'll stop there.
Sherry?
Along those lines, I wonder what else you can do to give us a greater sense of comfort. Because I think what we're seeing and hearing is that, I take your point about the Hinckley testimony, including examples of much larger facilities, as well as the 2-megawatt APS facility. But we're also hearing stories about, batteries in e-bikes and phones. And so what it leads one to wonder is it the technology? I mean, it seems that it is the technology and some flaws in the technology, which I think is what you found in your research, Mike. And so I would just ask you to consider what more can be done. Because as small as you may see the risk, from your side for the town, it's a big risk. I mean, it's a very big risk with us having to balance potential harm to our citizens against something that we need to say yes to in order for it to go forward. And you can appreciate the position this puts us in of having the welfare of our town, sort of in our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one instance of a 2-megawatt facility certainly caught my attention. And that was the post hoc analysis that I looked at.
Yes.
Which was I think, an underwriter's lab fire safety committee report. One of the other things they mentioned was that facility was installed before codes were amended to really catch up with battery energy storage technology. So right now, the Massachusetts Fire Safety Code has been amended to address stationary storage. So that's 527 CMR1, Section 52. And it both adopts and makes some minor modifications to a National Fire Protection Association standard for stationary storage facilities. The Massachusetts Building Code is now being in the process of being amended to provide standards for battery storage facilities. So I think, and certainly conditions to this project's permit could include, you will comply with all applicable, building and fire safety codes relating to battery storage.
Well, I mean, I think we're going to need any and all assurance that can be provided in order to get to a level of comfort. It's at least, as I see it, that's where we need to be. Let me just switch gears slightly on you, and I wanted to give you a couple of things to look at. And I have the quandary of not being able to move away from my microphone.
You want to come grab it?
If you could come grab this, that'd be great. I'll give you another one for your council, too. You all have seen this already, but pass it down. This is from the NREL website, and this is just a very quick description of who they are. And I'll provide a copy for the minutes so that we can reflect this in the record. But this is a description of who NREL is. It's a government agency. Really is, it has the mission of, working on renewable energy and its development. And this is just in way of an explanation of why I believe that the planning board is looking to NREL and its analysis of end of life in order to get, reliable and objective information on what those costs may be. I just wanted to share this with you all so that you know the basis for our thinking on this. I don't know how this board is going to make a decision or what that decision will be, but you've heard us talk about the NREL study, and just wanted to give you more of what our thinking is on that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and we have great respect for NREL and its research and objectivity. We think in this instance, the report prepared by this committee is a helpful starting point and a helpful guide for an analysis of decommissioning costs for a particular project. But at the end of the day, it's not an analysis of the decommissioning costs prepared by a professional engineer for this project. Nonetheless, we agreed to use those numbers. We put them in the decommissioning plan.
The issue, being our professional engineer could not validate those numbers, but they are still in the decommissioning plan. And our intent on the, revisiting was not to placate the board in any way. It's simply that is how the restudy of decommissioning costs on projects across the country is extremely routine and does provide the protection in the event of escalation or changes that would be warranted as a result of changes in technology or things that occur. But I think the basis of the decommissioning study, it's basically a construction project. There's a deconstruction removal of equipment, and it's not a mystic sort of hard to identify effort. It is indexed to the cost of labor and disposal and often recycling of equipment that goes with it. So it's we don't feel bashful about suggesting a restudy, just as labor rates change and advances in removal technologies may advance. We expect sort of the decommissioning cost to be fluid as time goes on, and ensures the protection of both you all in the project and in making sure there's enough assurances in place for I guess us, the landowner and the town, to make sure the proper disposal can occur.
Yeah, and you've made these points before. I think the authority that the board has to assign decommissioning costs is rather broad. And in the exercise of that broad authority, I don't think the board is necessarily going to feel bashful in looking at NREL's studies. I mean, the big issue is what is recycling going to cost, and that's one where I think there's just a lot of uncertainty and potentially a lot of cost.
And we know those costs today, and we expect them to actually improve from what was stated in the study. So,
Then that will be a great result that we can achieve after a review period. I mean, there's, nothing in this for the board to overestimate for no reason, but, and we can make adjustments over time, but this is, I think, where we seem to be coming down.
okay. Yeah, I mean, is it just, would it be better at 5 years, or?
I think 5 years is what,
That's what the bylaws are
Okay.
concerning, is 5 years.
Yeah.
And honestly, I see, if we did approve, I don't see any reason to revisit it, a year from now, because quite frankly, my position's not gonna change.
Yeah.
And I don't think the board's position, I can't talk for all of them, but I don't think the board's position is going to change. Our goal is to make sure that under no circumstances do we come up short should we have to decommission that project on your behalf. So, and the bylaw is very plain, the English is very plain. It's, the decommissioning bond value and how it's bonded is up to us. I mean, it's what we feel reasonable.
Okay.
So,
Just to be clear, what you suggested before, Mr. King, we can take our request off the table for a review prior to permitting, and just have the first review be at the 5-year mark. Okay.
Mike?
I've got just one more.
Oh, you used up your chits, you're all done?
Mike, can you excellent Okay, just to change the subject slightly, back to batteries, and if you could hand them this document. That, yes, that's for you all. This is a document from the ISO New England webpage, and this is a piece that they have put in on battery storage. And, I found this to be interesting in a couple of ways. But first, let me just confirm.
Thank you.
The battery that you are proposing to put in is in front of the meter, right? As opposed to behind the meter?
It is also behind the meter.
It is behind the meter.
Correct.
Okay. And what you've said is that you, so.
It's behind the meter, but as compared with the New Leaf project you were just discussing
Right.
earlier, instead of being DC coupled, it's AC coupled. So it's behind the same point of interconnection, but it has its own inverter. So it at least allows, it's presumptively used and will be used primarily to charge from the solar arrays,
Okay.
directly connected to the solar arrays,
But can also,
but can charge sometimes from the grid.
and and you've said that you expect it to charge from the distribution system only rarely? Is that, am I remembering that right? Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
I guess one of the things I was interested in seeing on this webpage is that there are a number of markets that are opening up or have already opened up for battery storage in New England. Regulation, ancillary services, bidding into the forward capacity market, et cetera, and, participating in the energy market.
Correct.
But you were saying that this battery or these batteries will not participate in any of those markets?
It's possible they might participate marginally, but it'll be primarily used, as we initially said in our application, to be primarily charged from the solar arrays to allow for a moderate shifting of, instead of sending the solar energy onto the grid, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it could send it at 6 o'clock in the afternoon to help make the so-called duck curve less shallow, so that there's a little more energy when people come home from work and turn on the air conditioners in the summertime, and so on.
Yeah.
So that'll be the main use case for this.
Additionally, during kind of the peak output of the day, there's more electricity being generated that can be put on the grid. So the main function is to store that energy and supply it later, and flatten sort of the supply, make it more reliable. The markets you're talking about are typically reserved for standalone. Day ahead, real time, voltage support. Those are all sort of business models for a standalone battery of 150 megawatts or so, something that is proposed, not for what we're talking about here on this project. I don't think we could, because we're trying to utilize the excess production from our solar facility, we wouldn't want to sell that battery capacity to the grid as a piece.
So you're saying you're not going to participate in those markets, or that you're primarily going to use the storage for the output of your solar project?
I'm saying both, that we're not going to participate in those markets. Our core function is to provide a more reliable supply from our solar project.
Not at all, or marginally, I think you said earlier? It's trying to get a sense of proportion here. Because, again, we talked about this before. My reading is that a battery used, assuming that the health, safety, and welfare threshold is crossed, that a battery can be considered part of a solar project if it is collecting the output of that project. That seems to be what the language says. If you are envisioning or planning a role beyond that, that involves participation in any markets, especially one that turns over control of that resource to a system operator, that looks like a different function to me.
Well, let me just, what we said from the beginning was the purpose of this battery energy storage equipment is primarily to charge from the solar arrays. And we know the board has expressed concerns about that. And we, in our last letter to the board, we specifically proposed a permit condition saying that the approval would not authorize construction of a standalone battery energy storage facility, does not authorize the installation of battery energy storage equipment that is primarily charged from the grid, and the battery's energy storage equipment shall be primarily charged from the project's solar arrays. We're proposing that you impose that condition on us, because that's what we originally proposed, and that's what we would like to live with.
It doesn't quite go as far as what I'm thinking at this point. Again, I don't know what the rest of the board may be thinking, but...
Well, it may also help to correct a misimpression. So the recent decision from March 1st that folks were talking about before was a decision from the Attorney General. And it looked at a Town of Wendell bylaw that prohibited standalone battery energy storage. And the Attorney General said, under a separate clause of 40A Section 3, that standalone battery energy storage has just as much protection as solar energy systems under 40A Section 3. That's what the Attorney General said. There's one clause that talks about protecting solar energy systems from unreasonable regulation, and then there's another clause that talks about systems that are used for the facilitation of collection of solar energy. And the Attorney General's interpretation was any battery energy storage system in Massachusetts will necessarily be facilitating the collection of solar energy. Again, we are not proposing a standalone storage project, but I would say that where the Attorney General has come down so strongly on that, I think for this board to be concerned about what degree of charging from the grid we would have is a misplaced concern at this point. And there's no difference in the safety profile of having a 2 megawatt DC coupled battery system only charging from the solar arrays and a 2 megawatt battery energy storage system that is primarily charged from the solar arrays.
And I would just say, I stand by my earlier interpretation. This was reviewing solar bylaws by the town and a finding that, by the Attorney General, that they were not adequately supported. I don't know what facts the Attorney General had in front of her when she made the finding that any standalone battery storage, at least in that town, is connected with a collection of solar. I would be interested to learn more about it. It seems to me to be factually difficult to support and opens a door, I think, to standalone battery storage in a way that I think would be very concerning for us. And we are trying to preserve, as I've said before, our ability to make reasonable regulations under, in respect to this area.
Absolutely, and the only thing the Attorney General put off limits was prohibition, not reasonable regulation. And of course, what this board has done time and again is delve deeply into a proposed project, understand its details, and figure out what are the reasonable conditions to comply with the bylaw, keep everybody safe.
And we'll do that here, too.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any more at this point.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
I'm totally amazed. Now, you better come back to me for a little while. I'm totally overwhelmed at this time.
Jane?
Sherry hit a bunch of what I was going to ask about, and much more eloquently.
Very eloquently, yes. I think to Sherry's talking point versus what you were saying, earlier, a little bit earlier, you had mentioned that, you know, your goal is to create clean, renewable energy and supply it to the residents of New England. And although I have my reservations about the safety of the batteries, I still don't understand the necessity to draw energy off the grid and put it in the battery. That's not producing clean, renewable energy. That's just taking energy that's been produced elsewhere, sticking it in a box, and then waiting for an advantageous time to put it back on the grid. And I guess my question would be, if it's such an important part of your business model that it can't be just the batteries are there strictly to store the energy that you produce, and it's, you know, it's an important cog in the wheel for it being a viable project financially, why is it not a stumbling point for the other project that we discussed tonight? They're not pulling energy off the grid.
Yeah, and I don't know if we misrepresented ourselves in any way. I think the questions that we had in previous hearings was, could you? And by the electrical configuration, yes. Our core business model is the same as the other projects. We have just decided to put our battery behind one inverter as opposed to spreading out the batteries behind multiple inverters that are associated with the solar panels. And it is electrical configuration unique to our project and our interconnection application that we have brought forward that's a little bit different than the other projects, but there's no sort of angle other than
Well, I guess
how we've submitted our interconnection application.
I guess if I understand it correctly, and Sherry, you're more learned in this area than I am, you know, you said that you're only gonna pull power off the grid occasionally. But the reality is, you don't have control over that. If you're part of that grid system, isn't the grid operator the one that decides when to take the power, when to put the power in the box?
So I think what Sherry's, there is an ability for a standalone battery storage to obligate its capacity to the grid and supply, in times of need, additional electricity. And typically, in exchange for that, there's a fixed payment, and then you're just guaranteed to be operational whenever the grid requires it, effectively. That's not what we are planning to do with this project. It is not, we are not building a standalone battery. We're not planning to operate a standalone battery. We're not getting into the day ahead and the arbitrage, and those are unique features that are incentivized by the grid because they're helpful. But the main goal and main purpose is to reduce our clipping losses. The clipping losses are electricity that would not be produced due to the other inverter sizing, and to be able to, accentuate, I guess, our solar power supply beyond, in the absence of a standalone solar project. So, I mean, it's not, I think the question that we've gotten in the past is can it? And it can, but that's simply because of how we've decided to configure the project, and is not a, key business plan for us.
Okay, thank you.
What's the reaction to changing the wording from primarily drawing power from the solar array to solely drawing power from the solar array as one of the conditions?
Well, that was kind of where I was headed, is does it have to be the way you've designed it? Or can it be, the batteries be strictly a collection agent for the array? Because that's how they're proposed, is they're a component of the array.
Yeah, it can. I think there's sort of, it's something, yes, we can control and, prevent from happening. Yeah.
So you can, simplistic terms, you can wire it so that it won't pull power off the grid.
Correct. Yeah.
But frankly, we just don't understand what the concern is of having a solar plus storage system where storage can sometimes charge from the grid.
Because you're proposing a solar collection facility and taking power off the grid that's been generated by coal, gas, nuclear, whatever the source might be, is not generating solar power.
Right.
That's my sticking point for that. You're proposing a solar collection facility.
Well, it goes to the primary use
Of the equipment on site.
right.
Right. So I think Jane's point is well taken, that it could be reconfigured and deemed that the batteries are solely for the use of collecting solar-generated power and then redistributing it to the grid at opportune times. And, at that point, you can put it on the grid anytime you want. I don't care.
Well, I mean, our perspective from the last meeting, and then reaffirmed by what the Attorney General has said on March 1st, is that this type of storage facility is for the facilitation of the collection of solar energy, even if it sometimes charges from the grid. Its primary purpose is to collect power from the solar energy.
Primary is a very all-encompassing term.
Yeah. I mean, I think in times where the distribution grid is in distress and needs support, our project would be designed and capable to support blackouts or emergency events from happening.
Right, you're talking about putting power onto the grid, though.
Putting power onto the
We're
grid.
talking about taking power off the grid.
Right. And so I think there's also times where the system can be overloaded, with too much electricity, in which our projects could support, overloading of those lines as well. So but by no means is that a business sort of model or anything. If you decide that an emergency response of our project cannot or should not be done, then that's fine. We can live with that. But we've sort of built this to have a little bit more flexibility than most projects in the case of an eventual need by the grid to support it.
Right.
That's simply it. And I guess another piece, so all solar projects, standalone, DC coupled battery, AC coupled battery, pull power off the grid. Those inverters, the electronics, everything needs power when they're not producing. So at nighttime, there will be power drawn by the solar projects, whether you're have an AC coupled, DC coupled battery or no battery at all.
Right, but that's to maintain your equipment, not to solely pull the power off and put it in a box and wait for an opportune time to redistribute.
Right.
Also, in terms of clean energy and grid charging, I think we explained before that grid charged energy storage is still viewed as a cleaner energy solution, because what it does is allows you to charge the battery at times when the grid power is generated by less dirty sources. And then when the grid needs power at a peak time, discharge that energy and displace the most highest polluting sources.
Okay. Sam?
Nothing to add, I would just say, as I said in the past. As far as locations go, this is a good location. It's already been cleared. There are 4 other solar arrays within sight of it. I don't think the public will ever see it. My main concern is the water. Always has been. We should have test wells at every site. I think this is a good site compared to all others. Just worry about the water. I know their guy says it goes the other direction, but what if?
Yeah. Carl?
Okay. I have 3 articles I'll read in at some point, but, okay. Notwithstanding my fellow planning board's members' fears that I overthink these things, I'm going to try and have you help me from the applicant's position understand some things. And this was primarily driven by your letter of March 22nd, 23rd, whatever the date was. And I don't want to get into debating how land use in this application is going to be conferred, but I want to understand a couple of things. My understanding is a land use can be conferred in one of 3 ways. It can be as of right, it can be granted as a special permit, and it can be granted through a variance. Those are ways in which land uses can be established. I think there's probably some King's grants out there that establish land use, but I don't think we need to worry about those. So in the context of those 3 ways of conveying a land use, site plan review is not a way of conveying a land use. Is that correct? That's my understanding?
Correct.
Okay, so site plan review doesn't convey a land use. It does put conditions on a project. Is that correct?
Correct. What the courts have said is it's a way of regulating as of right uses through reasonable conditions.
Okay, so do those conditions then go with the land, or are those conditions only owned or obligating the current project owner? That's my concern is I understand that if we condition a land use, those conditions go with the land forever and ever. But if a condition isn't, like the decommissioning bond, is that a condition that's conferred through site plan review, or is that a condition that's conferred through special permit, or is that a condition on an as-of-right use? What I'm concerned is I don't understand how those conditions get conferred to the land and protect the ongoing in perpetuity land versus going to New Leaf, not New Leaf, but
Long Road.
Long Meadow. Where do those conditions, how are they conveyed, and who has that obligation?
So typically, the whole purpose of site plan approval is to allow use, but have consideration of the project's impacts and allow for imposing reasonable conditions. And
a project, though, but that's not a,
no.
that's, okay, but that doesn't go to the land then, it goes to the project.
Right, but even let's just call it a special use permit, the more conventional special permit, where it's issued with conditions, those would be conditions imposed with respect to that use. At any rate, the site plan approval for a project it imposes conditions that are binding on that project. And we've seen some site plan approval decisions require that the site plan approval decision be recorded, just like a regular special permit is.
Okay, so there are ways for us to ensure that depending if, I'm assuming it goes forward, I'm not debating that, I don't know what the decision is, but it's not going to turn on the land use and how the land use is established.
No.
I'm just thinking about your argument and just trying to understand. And I don't want to debate your argument, I understand your position. So we can condition this with all the conditions that you've outlined that you would accept, the bonding, and that could be conditioned even if it only turns out to be a site plan review.
Absolutely. Yes.
You agree with that, Ken? That understanding? I'm trying to understand. Did you understand my question?
No, I didn't understand it completely.
Okay, my question is, if this turns out not to be a special permit and only a site plan review, the conditions still are conveyed and are binding?
Yes, I would agree with that. Especially since it's a site plan review special permit.
I'm trying not to split that hair, but that's a future hair that somebody's going to split.
Yeah, but that's the position that I'm taking now.
I understand it, but my question was, if it's only a site plan review,
There's still conditions that apply and run with the land.
that was where, so I feel much better about the hair splitting at this point. Do you agree? So I'm looking at the applicant, and the applicant agrees with that. The conditions would apply.
Yes, absolutely.
That was it?
I thought it was a fairly, only person in the world who thinks about this is probably me, but did any of you think about this?
Maybe a little.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the crux of your
Oh,
comments.
I mean, all the other issues, I'm not going to rehash batteries and all that
Okay,
health, safety, and welfare, all things that we need to consider.
okay. Before I open it up to public comments, since this is a public hearing, do you have anything else to add?
I guess our final remark would be, we've met together quite a lot and provided a great deal of information. And we'd ask that after you hear from the public tonight, you move ahead to close the public hearing and move on to a decision. And we look forward to working with you on crafting appropriate conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw you, Annie, I'm not ready yet.
No, but I don't know what a point of order is, so this may be a point of order.
And that might be. Well, yeah,
Can I suggest that Mr. Baptiste was going to be saved till last, and he hasn't spoken?
I haven't closed the public hearing yet, so we're still good.
Put me in the spot, Amy.
Okay, is there anybody from the public that would like to weigh in? And before you come up, I just want to caution you, the barrage of emails that we received over the past few days have been nothing short of irritating. If you're going to come up and give us some brand-new information, and that doesn't mean another study about an endangered species, but just from another person. It means new information, relevant information. Great, we want to hear it. We want to make sure we have all the facts. But if you're going to come up and just regurgitate the stuff we've heard several times, I'm not going to allow it. I'm just going to ask you to go back and sit down. So,
We've read everything
right,
that's come in, all hundreds of pages of it.
right. It
And I
was,
understand all of it.
it was nuts. I
I was
mean,
just,
Thursday afternoon and Friday, I'm in Florida trying to work on my parents' house, and my phone is going ba-ding, 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 all day long. And it was just, and a lot of it was stuff that we've talked about. So, again, you know, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody. I know this is a very serious conversation we're having, and I would like to think that you understand that we are taking the best interest of the town very seriously in this. But just, like I said, please don't come up here and just give us another lecture on an endangered species that we've already talked about.
for years.
I'm not gonna hear it. So, having said that, who would like to be first? Nancy.
Nancy McHale, Faring Hill Road. Thank you very much for your indulgence, and I personally apologize for the barrage that I contributed to. Again, I wouldn't be saying something if I didn't have a question. I heard something here tonight that I really hadn't thought about in terms of the internal suppression, the fire suppressions in the battery systems. I understood, not these gentlemen, but the ones before, saying that they were going to be dry chemicals. I don't know what that means and what those chemicals would be. Maybe if we could have some sort of explanation of what the internal battery suppression systems are, that might be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, I can speak to Halon. I don't know if you're planning on using Halon as a suppression?
We do have somebody from Long Road on the line here, who's kind of our battery expert. I don't know if he could maybe respond to this.
Of course, if we could let him into the meeting, ask him to.
Kevin Hutchison?
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Appreciate it.
Kevin, did you hear that question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. If you could identify yourself, please.
Yeah, this is Kevin Hutchison with Long Road Energy.
Okay. And if you'd be so kind as to respond to the inquiry from the public concerning what type of suppression is planned to be used inside the battery storage units?
Yeah, for our proposed system, we do not plan on using any sort of chemical suppressant. The batteries will go through a UL testing, and it is actually proven that they do not propagate between containers to container. So at this point, we have not considered any sort of chemical suppressant.
So there'd be no internal suppression system at all?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
They would be, yeah, so I think they'd be limited to kind of the containers holding each individual.
Right, but what he's
battery
saying
set.
is there's no suppression system within each container.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Hello. Annie Hayes, Farmers Lane, with all brand-new stuff, Ken. Thank you. This may be a misunderstanding, but it seems to me it's something in plain sight that's really an elephant in the room, so I want to talk about it. Twice or three times, it has been mentioned that the panels will be recycled from this project in 7 to 10 years, and given away between 15 and 25. And when I think about it, I think, why would they spend all that money and time and put them into the secondhand thrift store for solar panels in 7 to 10 years? And I thought about it a lot, came up with an idea, and just this afternoon, brand new stuff, I found an article that validates it. So the idea is that I also spoke to a recycler of cadmium telluride in Maryland who put the linchpin in. And what it is that in 7 to 10 years, the inverters are old and may cease to work. And I know that because I had one that exactly at 10 and 1 month, no longer warranted, it conked out. So I was stuck. And what happens then is that they have to be replaced and they have to be matched to the panels that are there. So often at that point, this recycler said, project developers take the solar panels out. They may even take the aluminum if it's not, brand new spanking new and has some problems. They take the solar panels out, put them on the second-hand market, which is a booming market, it turns out. This is the article I found. And they put in new technology, more power generating panels. So to me, number one, there is a concern about, wow, isn't that a whole new project? I mean, what are they going to put in? How do we know? And how do we okay that? Or what's it going to leach? How does it affect the environment, et cetera? What's happened in the meantime? The second thing is more power, more battery storage, got to have it. We're not talking about putting it on the grid, putting it off the grid. This is for this higher generation power, new tech array of panels. And maybe they're smaller. And so you can not only get higher kilowatts and then megawatts altogether, you can get more of them. And if you have more battery storage, you need more batteries, that's a big deal, because we've just been spending an hour and a half about batteries, right? And then,
Well, to that point, Annie,
Yeah.
I would have to interject and say if there was any if there was any change in the configuration of the array, up to and really zeroing in on adding more batteries, they would have to come back before us. They're not just gonna truck in a couple more batteries and drop them on the
Oh, I
site.
understand that. But is that not a whole other project? And how do we consider that now? It's also avoiding the issue of recycling because they've just sold them to a second party. And the second parties that are typically happening now are what I had spoken about once before.
Mr. King, the aftermarket is beyond our scope to regulate.
It is, and quite honestly, we've discussed the whole recycling concept already, so I think on that subject, I would want to stop you.
Wow.
We do
Okay.
understand your concern about how the panels are recycled and by whom, but we've discussed that several times.
Well, I want to add that we have environmental justice communities in Wareham, and these panels are going to go to environmental justice communities. And I think we have an ethical responsibility. Carl, you asked about that. You said to them last meeting, can you tell us that they will be properly disposed of? They have no responsibility, none. And it's cadmium, telluride. I'm going to stop there.
They have no responsibility to the planning board. They have responsibility to federal law, state law, but not, the planning board can't regulate that.
Well, if there is no regulation
That's my
for
opinion.
secondhand sales,
But the federal government and the state government, I don't want to get into a debate.
All right.
I'm sorry.
okay.
Thank you, Ann. Is there anybody else? Oh, this gentleman here.
Yep. Richard Semple, 194 Hathaway Street. I'd just like to add that we should be very cautious of what the Attorney General decisions and statements say, because they're only pushing an agenda to get this green energy across, and 20 years down the road, the same people, same thing that you added, they're not going to be in office. It's going to be a different person. It's a can of worms. Secondly, to Mr. Corbett's statement about don't put water on it, I work outside 90% of the time. Around here, the wind can blow from 10 to 30 knots at any given time and can come up at any time. If there's a fire going on in one of them battery containers, it's going to blow into our residential areas because at 30 knots, it will pin the smoke, and the smoke will travel miles along the ground, and that's going to contend. The worst people we need, the people we need to look out for the most are our children, and they're the closest to the ground. So to let something burn, if just say next to Target, if that caught on fire, the prevailing wind comes right up over, that whole shopping center would be contaminated with smoke blowing at 30 miles an hour. So there is no safe, don't put it out, let it burn, don't let it burn. You got water going in the ground and you got smoke going into the residential areas, because they're not too far away from any of these projects. And I guess with that, I'm just very concerned about all this going so fast to get everybody energy, that it's definitely going to be an albatross down the road, and we're all going to have the burden. And the state and the town, I mean, the government, our federal government and our state government does not care about any of us sitting here tonight. They won't care about us today. They don't care about us today. They don't care about down the road. They like their minions to come in, push the agenda, and then once they get it all in and all in place, they'll come in and they'll just say, tough luck, tough luck, tough luck. And that's what I'm afraid of.
Thank you. Let's had somebody online.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
We can?
This is Jim Manise, Cranberry Highway.
Yes, sir.
The battery storage, is there secondary containment of 2 times or 3 times the volume for these storage containers? So if water needed to be used to control it, that the volume of water would be contained in the secondary containment, or is it just slabs?
If I'm not mistaken, they're just slabs, correct? It's not like an oil tank farm where they have a containment ring around the tank?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So his answer, Jim, is no, there is no secondary containment.
Okay, thank you. And has the board contracted with anybody to look into some of the technical aspects of everything that's been discussed so they could get a professional opinion on that? And that would be at the proponent's.
Expense?
Yes.
Yeah, they have already been broached with that subject.
And has the board taken advantage of that at all? And would you be?
Since the subject was broached about 45 minutes ago, no, we haven't had a chance yet.
All right, well, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Cosgrove?
Thank you. Barry Cosgrove, West Wareham. Mr. Chairman, through you, 2 questions to the applicant. Borrowing from your question about whether this project has been sold, transferred, licensed, or they anticipate whether it be the property or the project?
I believe that question's been answered, but if you would go ahead and answer it again.
No, we haven't sold the project.
And how about the second question? Have you made a final decision through you, Mr. Chairman, on the panels? There's a question in your previous presentations about that having been undecided. Have you made a decision on the panels?
I think we've been consistent. We're using the first solar panels for this project.
But you're continuing to leave open the option of not using those?
If there's a benefit to the project, I think that's an option we'd like to maintain, but if the board feels that First Solar is the only panel they see fit here, that's something we can live with.
And we've also said that to the extent that there's any change in panels that would change what you've looked at and considered to improving the project, that it would be something we'd come back to you on.
So that you would be open to a condition that states that the project, if approved, would be approved with the understanding you use First Solar, and if something should change your mind and you want to go in another direction, you come back to the board.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be phrased as if it's something not comparable to First Solar.
No, I would stick to First Solar, quite honestly. It seems to be, I mean, that name keeps coming up, so for me, I would say condition being that you use First Solar. If something changes, that you come back to the board for approval on a replacement.
We've only installed First Solar panels to date, so.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes, thank you. Just to reinforce a previous comment about looking at the NREL website, it's very interesting to see that First Solar and NREL have been partners for 30-plus years in a number of projects. So it seems odd to me that partners for 30 years would know what they're doing when it comes to decommissioning the stuff that they design. And in this regard, I think it's important to clarify whether the decommissioning number is based on DC or AC. Remember, DC is the output, AC is the step-down output. We tried to get an answer from that on NREL, but I think it's something you need to chase down. It has a dollar difference. On the special permit, we're not going to weigh into that. We gave you our views on that 4 months ago. I'm glad that you guys are catching up on that. On the AG opinion, it has nothing to do with this case. This is an opinion that basically said that Wendell did a horrible job trying to come up with any explanation for a blanket prohibition on storage. There's nothing to do, and importantly, there's a footnote in here that's worth chasing down, because several reasonable restrictions on solar were included in that same Article 30 and were approved. On the water, the gentleman beat me to it. The wind blows in every direction, and there's no good direction down there. It's going to be pick your poison. Someone's going to get the smoke, or somebody's going to get the water. On the battery economics, they're in a box. They told the town they don't have a viable project with essentially the same number of panels. So they came up with the alternative revenue source, which is the battery, which is a revenue source, even if it's not used primarily from off the street. It's the first program, SMART program, benefits, some say corporate welfare, that they will predictably get. On the wells, I talked to the Harvard professor again about this, and he said, think of wells, monitoring wells as underground cameras. If you don't have a hydrology study, It's like keeping the cap on the camera. You don't know where to put them, you don't know how to monitor it. In closing, we continue to pray that this would be denied, but if not, I haven't heard the word cash mentioned very much anymore. Anybody read the news, looking at these banks? What happened? They ran out of cash. Why do people rush to the bank? Because they want cash. So if it's a tough situation, the company's going to preserve cash, and you're not going to have cash. Cash, cash, cash. Finally, I have 2 documents I'd like to submit. One is a proposed list of permit conditions, and one is an update from the town. If I could hand those to you, Mr. Chairman, for submission to the record.
Okay. Do you have enough copies that the proponents are entitled to one, too?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, read this into the record. Mr. Cosgrove has submitted a document titled Permit Conditions 0 Route 25. Distribute that to the board.
One for Ken?
No.
John, if you could share with Ken.
And the second is a, looks like a letter from David Fletcher, or to David Fletcher from the Conservation Administrator, dated March 16th, 2023. Copies submitted to the board. These will be put up on the site. Came up.
Jim, do you have any questions for our group?
I do not, to be honest. I think I got all the information that I needed and then some over the past few days through all the emails that were sent from all the different people. So
Thank you very much.
we're good. Thank you. We have somebody online. I'll make sure you folks get a copy of this if you haven't already. I came up one copy short on the first one, so somebody may have to give theirs up and read it online.
Excuse me, Mr. Cosgrove, did you send electronic copies? Did you send electronic copies?
I already have it. I'm good.
Oh.
These
There
are-
was, I was trying to help you out.
The people to the left of me were much more giving than you. Okay, we have somebody online that wants to weigh in. They're muted? They're unmuted. Okay, if you could, if you're joining us, could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Lorraine Smith.
Okay, Lorraine,
I've
welcome.
been watching these meetings for quite a few months now. I keep hearing the same thing over and over. I just want to bring a few things to the board's attention, and probably anyone in the room that can remember some of this stuff.
Well, first, Lorraine, let me caution, just like I cautioned the folks in the galley here, if it's not new and relevant, it's got no place in here, this discussion tonight. So,
Understood.
okay, thanks.
I just wanted to mention, back in the 70s, if some of us remember, the anti-nuclear crowd claimed that the world would be uninhabitable in 30 years because of all the nuclear waste storage leaks from power plant rod storage. But here we are. As a result, America is the only first world country that abandoned nuclear power while the rest of the world embraces it. Yes, there were disasters in Japan and Russia, but these were not failures of technology, but an earthquake and human error. They claimed our children would glow in the dark and our water would be undrinkable. Every single time some anti-group wants to kill something, they dig out the same old tactics from a very tired playbook. These arguments always, the sky is falling, or a better one, the sky will fall. It's always about fear when the real issue should be science. These people never factor advances in technology that in retrospect also always render these futuristic disaster claims ridiculous and unrealized. Technology is always advancing faster than these end-of-the-world prophecies. Ridiculous, unrealized. Sorry, I typed that twice. Technology is advancing faster than the end-of-the-world prophecies. In 2000, Bohr said, the polar caps will melt and be gone in 12 years. How many hundred billions of dollars were wasted because of that non-science? AOC claimed the world would end, AOC, the world would end in 7 years, 6 years ago. How many trillion have been wasted because of that non-science? How many true beneficial opportunities to improve our world have been missed because of these tactics? Yet here we are again. In 30 years, our batteries are going to be destroyed by the water. No, they won't. They are probably people in this room with an electric car. Those batteries are truly existential threat to the world, but no one seems to care. This project in front of you is the state of the art today and consistent with or better than similar facilities that you've already approved. 3 or 4 of them right in the same location. It poses no threat to our environment now, nor will it in the future. Unrealistic and unfounded claims of disaster are not supported by science or the very fact that science advances at unimaginable speed. The best science in the world today supports this project.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not done yet. I'm sorry. Lost my slot. Yes, this is being today the state-of-the-art project. It's as safe and as modern science can reasonably make it by every standard. The energy company that Mr. Fletcher's dealing with is state-of-the-art, top of the line, if you've read about them. They've also agreed to a lot of the requests that the board has asked for. So I am in favor of the project. I would just like to put that on the record. It's a great location. Mr. Fletcher already has another solar project, which is run right to the T. The solar company visits it 3 times a week and inspects it. This location cannot even be seen by anybody anywhere. I drive by Toby Road and I'm sick when I see the solar panel sitting in my face. But again, this is what we're dealing with today. This is a good project and I support it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, if you could identify yourself.
Yes, my name is George Effen, West Wareham. By way of background, it should be noted that I think that this entire project is unworkable without massive taxpayer support. So in that we are the taxpayers financing this, you would think the benefit of the doubt would weigh in favor of protecting our community. But instead, what we have is a project with a checkered history and an applicant who fails to deal with the town in good faith. Instances of this are numerous, and originally I was going to review a litany of items, but in respect to the board's request, I will not rehash the old news and will forego that. Instead, I'd like to bring up one simple but very significant case in point to illustrate my contention that this applicant says what he thinks the board wants to hear, but his actions are really inconsistent with his words. It's the popular issue here of the on-site battery being used to store electricity from the grid. Now, in the previous meeting, the applicant stated a number of times this would only be an incidental use with very limited financial significance, that only be exercising this option a couple days of the year. With such extremely limited use, one could only conclude that this is not a significant component of the project. So one would expect that when the applicant is told by the board that this is an important stumbling block for the town, he needs to remove this provision if he wants the plan to be approved, he'd immediately eliminate it and move on. But what is the applicant's response? He doubles down on his original position, mounting a vigorous and lengthy defense, and at the end, he refuses to remove the provision from his plan. So what are we to believe? Do we take at face value the applicant's statement that this is merely a, quote, de minimis use of the battery? Or do we look at their refusal to remove this provision? Based on their actions, not their words, I have to conclude that this is, in fact, an extremely important aspect of their plan, and they're merely putting up a smokescreen complete with an elegant legal jargon, hoping that the board will simply take their word on the matter while they continue to conceal their broader intentions. So what else has the applicant failed to disclose, and what additional unpleasant surprises await us down the line on this project? I can only come to the same conclusion that I had already reached before, namely that this applicant has consistently demonstrated a lack of transparency and a lack of good faith in dealing with the town, and there is no evidence that this situation is about to change. I therefore continue to recommend, based on this applicant's lengthy record of deception and evasiveness, that the board deny this application. Failing that, I recommend at the very least that a provision be added to this proposal that specifically prohibits the downloading or storage of any electricity from the grid and provides for monitoring of such activity with significant punitive monetary penalties if this provision is violated. Thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you. Anybody else online? That's it? Nobody else in the gallery? Okay. Any other comments, concerns, wants, wishes, desires? Mike?
It's amazing that we can try to make decisions. We've had a lot of technology pushed in front of us, a lot of fluff, as they call it in the industry, and a lot of what comes down to is common sense. And we got the facts in front of us. I think we can go from there on common sense. The Attorney General, they don't care. Federal government don't care. They're pumping billions of dollars into the solar industry for clean energy. It doesn't do anybody any good but somebody else. It goes in somebody else's pocket. My light bill hasn't gone down, and we got a shitload of solar farms in town. So, you know, I think it's time to move on. I think we got enough evidence, and let's cut out the bullshit and move on.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
Thank you.
Is there anything we're looking for from the attorney, or our attorney, town attorney?
Not on this project, I don't think so.
I can't think of anything.
No.
You can include that in your deliberations.
Oh, we can? That doesn't have to be part of public hearing?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
So, if I understand the process correctly, I want to make sure I get this right. We can close the public hearing tonight. We have up to 60 days to deliver our decision with a final vote, and we're free to discuss, as in the other project, details, concerns, whatnot, in a public forum, just with no public input.
That's correct.
Get it right.
Move you close the public hearing.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to close the public hearing from Sam Corbett. Do we have a second?
Second.
There's a second by Mike Baptiste. All in favor of closing this public hearing? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The public hearing is now officially closed. I would entertain a...
Do we want to set a date for a
That's-
discussion?
Yes, that's,
So-
can we work, do we think we have enough time to work on that same date, or do you think we need to devote another complete workshop to this?
Well, Mike was going to say
I
something.
was going to say on the 7th. I think that's a good idea.
The 3rd, on the 3rd?
Yeah, the 3rd. Yeah, I got it written down here, the 3rd.
April 3? All right, so that gives us 2 topics for that workshop. All right,
Okay.
so,
That-
yeah, because we'll be free to discuss it.
And some of the topics overlap projects.
Right. Okay. All right, so I entertain a motion
Just to
to,
point out that the Borrego Solar, the extension of time won't be a deliberation, that'll be an open discussion.
yeah, okay. But we can still have these 2 separate projects on the same workshop date.
And you don't have to have public input to either one either as well.
Right, that's the whole idea. We're free to discuss this and dig into details, and everybody can raise concerns or hopes, and we can get to a decision.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. So I entertain a motion to schedule this on the previously scheduled workshop of April 3.
Second.
Motion from Sam Corbett, seconded by Mike Baptiste. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam? Carl?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We will take this up on the 3rd and see where it takes us. And I am correct, right? 60 days, Ken?
60 days, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Lost my... This is just the upcoming board schedule. Member comments. Do we have any member comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Jonathan, Mr. Chair, through you to Jonathan, you're going to revise the decision for Dos Amigos? Yeah, okay. There was a
Little
typo,
snafu. Yeah, I
little
saw it.
snafu. So, to that end, I understand we voted to authorize you to sign those documents, and I'm okay with it. Is there any way we could actually see them before they get signed?
Going to town hall?
Well, I didn't even know it was available. That's why I sent the note.
I think on that particular one, it was just a sheer coincidence I happened to be in town hall.
No, I don't have any problem with that. And I've asked Jonathan to send me a copy of them in the future, but I don't care.
Yeah,
Does
no,
anybody else have a concern? Just me?
we can certainly make sure
Issue
everybody
there?
sees it.
Huh?
Is there a trust issue there?
No, it's,
I am,
no, it's not trust, Mike. It's more that we're moving so fast that simple little things get through.
Yeah.
And I
think
tend
it's
to
a
be a
good
little anal about I's and T's dotted and.
really?
Well,
That's surprising.
I
what
mentioned
you
that
said.
earlier, but.
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Mike Baptiste, seconded by Sam Corbett. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Carl? I know you want to stay.
We're adjourning. Okay, aye.
And the chair votes aye. Good night, all.